Most people believe the end of a relationship begins with an argument. They imagine a single moment. It would almost be comforting if endings worked that way, because at least then you would know when the story stopped belonging to both of you. But some endings never announce themselves. They don't arrive with anger or resentment. They arrive with silence so ordinary that it feels harmless. Nothing dramatic happens. There is no obvious reason to panic. Life continues exactly as it did yesterday, except something invisible has already begun slipping away. You notice it without being able to prove it. The room feels the same, the conversations sound the same, the routines remain untouched, yet somewhere underneath all of it, the feeling that once connected two people has started dissolving. That is why interest dies quietly. It leaves long before anyone is willing to admit it has gone. The frightening part is that the beginning looks almost identical to the middle. They still smile. They still ask about your day. They still remember familiar habits and repeat familiar words. From the outside nothing appears broken, which makes you question your own instincts every time they whisper. You convince yourself that you're imagining things because there is no evidence strong enough to justify your discomfort. After all, people have stressful weeks. People become tired. Life demands attention in places that have nothing to do with love. So you explain away. You are searching for the version of them that existed only months ago, wondering why someone standing in front of you suddenly feels so far away. What disappears first is rarely affection. It is curiosity. There was a time when your thoughts fascinated them, when your smallest stories carried enough weight to hold their attention, when your opinions felt like unopened books they wanted to read. Then, almost without warning, your presence becomes familiar in the wrong way. Familiarity is comforting until it quietly replaces discovery. Once there is nothing left to discover, conversations become predictable, laughter arrives from memory instead of surprise, and the emotional distance between two people begins expanding so slowly that neither notices it happening. Curiosity was never loud enough for anyone to appreciate while it existed, yet its absence changes everything. This is why the most painful losses rarely begin with rejection. They begin with confusion. You start replaying ordinary moments, trying to locate the exact second something shifted. Was it something you said? Something you failed to notice? Did you become too available? Too distracted? Too comfortable? The human mind struggles to accept uncertainty, so it invents explanations simply to escape the discomfort of not knowing. Every memory becomes evidence. Every conversation becomes an investigation. You revisit moments that once made you smile, searching them for invisible cracks that only seem obvious now. But the truth is that some changes happen beneath the surface for so long that there is no single memory to blame. The ending wasn't hidden inside one moment. It was scattered across hundreds of ordinary days. There is a strange loneliness that comes from realizing someone hasn't necessarily stopped caring. They have simply stopped wondering. The difference is almost impossible to describe until you've lived through it. Care can survive on habit. People continue doing what they have always done because routine asks very little of them. Curiosity demands presence. It asks someone to remain emotionally awake. The moment curiosity fades, the relationship begins surviving on memory instead of discovery. Everything still functions, but nothing grows. You don't lose them all at once. You lose the parts that kept making the connection feel alive. Perhaps that is why people often recognize the ending only after it has already happened. Looking back, they remember countless tiny moments that once seemed insignificant. The pauses became slightly longer. The excitement became slightly quieter. Shared experiences no longer created new memories, they simply repeated old ones. None of those moments looked important individually. Together, they formed a slow farewell that neither person could hear while it was happening. The mind resists accepting gradual loss because gradual loss offers nothing to fight against. Anger has a target. Betrayal has a reason. Distance has an explanation. But fading interest feels like trying to hold water in your hands. Every time you believe you've found the problem, it slips somewhere else. You become exhausted not because someone hurt you intentionally, but because nothing makes enough sense to confront. You cannot argue with a feeling that quietly stopped growing. You cannot negotiate with a curiosity that no longer arrives naturally. All you can feel is the growing weight of trying to revive something that no one officially declared dead. There comes a point where you begin performing for a version of the relationship that no longer exists. You tell yourself that if you become more interesting, more patient, more attentive, more understanding, something will suddenly return. You aren't chasing another person anymore. You're chasing a memory. Every effort is directed toward recreating an emotional atmosphere that disappeared so gradually you never noticed yourself crossing into a different reality. The tragedy is not that your efforts have no value. It's that they are being offered to yesterday instead of today. This is why quiet endings leave deeper scars than dramatic ones. A dramatic ending gives the heart something solid to mourn. A quiet ending leaves behind endless possibilities. Maybe things weren't really changing. Maybe tomorrow would have felt different. Maybe next week would have brought everything back. Hope stretches the ending long after reality has already moved on. Instead of grieving one painful moment, you grieve hundreds of almost moments, days where it still felt possible, conversations that almost sounded like before, smiles that almost meant the same thing. The word almost becomes heavier than heartbreak itself. And somewhere inside that uncertainty, another change begins. You stop measuring time by days or seasons. You measure it by memories that feel increasingly distant from the present. The beginning starts feeling brighter than it probably was because memory edits pain out of old happiness. You compare today to a version of yesterday that never truly existed, making the distance feel even greater. Nostalgia quietly becomes another character in the relationship, convincing you that what was lost had once been perfect, even if it never really was. The strange thing about fading interest is that it rarely changes only one person. While one person slowly turns away, the other slowly turns inward. They begin examining themselves with a level of suspicion they never had before. Ordinary imperfections suddenly feel responsible for extraordinary loss. Every flaw seems larger because the mind desperately wants an answer that can be controlled. If the ending happened because of something you did, then perhaps another version of you could have prevented it. That belief is painful, but it is often easier to carry than accepting that not every emotional distance has a clear explanation. Over time, you start noticing how much of your identity had quietly attached itself to being seen by that one person. It isn't simply that you miss them. You miss the version of yourself that existed in their attention. There was a confidence that came from feeling understood without having to explain yourself. There was a comfort in believing that someone was still discovering new pieces of you, even after all this time. When that quiet curiosity disappeared, it felt as though parts of your own identity disappeared with it. You began wondering whether you had actually changed or whether you were simply standing in front of someone who no longer looked at you the same way. That question can follow someone for years because it reaches far beyond a single relationship. It changes the way they walk into future connections. They become alert to tiny shifts that most people would never notice. A conversation that feels slightly different. A glance that doesn't linger quite as long. A laugh that sounds polite instead of effortless. Once you've experienced a quiet ending, your heart starts listening for silence more than words. It learns to recognize absence before it recognizes presence. Sometimes that instinct protects you. Other times it convinces you that history is repeating itself when it isn't. The memory of one slow goodbye can quietly shape the way you experience every hello that comes after. The hardest part is that no one teaches you how to grieve something that disappeared by degrees. People understand broken promises. They understand betrayal. They understand losing someone in an instant. But they rarely talk about losing someone one ordinary day at a time. There is no ceremony for the gradual fading of excitement. No clear moment when you can say, this is where it ended. Instead, your memories become filled with scenes that looked perfectly normal while they were happening, only revealing their sadness long afterward. It is like walking through a familiar house for the final time without realizing it is the last visit. Only when you look back do you notice that every room was already becoming a memory. Perhaps that is why people spend so long searching for hidden reasons. They imagine there must have been a conversation they overlooked or a decision they failed to recognize. They replay entire chapters of their lives hoping to uncover the invisible turning point. Yet life rarely offers that kind of precision. Human emotions are not machines that break with a single loud sound. More often they resemble a shoreline shaped by countless quiet waves. No individual wave seems powerful enough to change the landscape, but after enough time the coastline no longer looks the way it once did. You cannot point to the exact wave that changed everything because every wave left behind something too small to notice on its own. Eventually, a realization begins to emerge, and it is quieter than all the others. You understand that what hurt the most was not simply losing another person. It was living through the slow disappearance of certainty. There was a time when you never questioned where you stood. You never measured conversations for hidden meanings or searched ordinary moments for evidence that something was slipping away. Certainty made love feel effortless because your mind was free to experience it instead of constantly evaluating it. When certainty faded, peace faded with it. Even before the relationship changed, your inner world already had. Looking back, you may discover that the first loss wasn't theirs at all. It was your ability to relax inside something that once felt safe. Long before the distance became visible, your instincts had already begun working overtime, trying to solve a mystery that had no obvious clues. You became emotionally exhausted without realizing why. Not because every day was painful, but because every day required interpretation. Every silence needed an explanation. Every ordinary moment became another puzzle your heart insisted on solving. It is difficult to feel close to anyone while constantly searching for proof that they are still close to you. And then, almost unexpectedly, another truth appears. Interest rarely dies in one dramatic instant, but neither does healing. Healing is just as quiet. It doesn't arrive on a particular morning with a sudden feeling of freedom. It begins the day you stop searching your memories for a missing sentence that could explain everything. It begins when you accept that some chapters remain incomplete, not because you failed to understand them, but because human hearts are often changing beneath the surface long before anyone has the words to describe it. The absence of a perfect explanation does not make your experience any less real. Years later, what stays with you is rarely the pain itself. Pain eventually softens around the edges. What remains is the awareness of how invisible change can be. You become more attentive to the small moments that quietly build closeness, a genuine curiosity, an unforced conversation, the feeling of being fully present with another person. You realize those moments were never ordinary. They only seemed ordinary because they happened every day. Their value became visible only after they were gone. Maybe that is why quiet endings haunt us more than loud ones. Loud endings leave memories that are easy to identify. Quiet endings leave ghosts hidden inside ordinary days. A familiar room. A shared silence. A routine that once felt alive. Nothing in those memories looks tragic until you realize they belong to a time when the connection was already slipping away, and no one knew it yet. In the end, interest does not always disappear because someone stopped caring overnight. Sometimes it fades through unnoticed shifts, changing priorities, quiet emotional distance, or simply the slow evolution of two lives that no longer move in the same rhythm. That truth is difficult because it refuses to offer a villain. It gives you no dramatic scene to replay and no final sentence to memorize. It leaves you with something far more unsettling. The understanding that some of the most important changes in life happen so quietly that they can only be recognized in hindsight. Perhaps that is why this kind of ending stays with people for so long. It reminds us that the moments we fear most are not always the loudest. Sometimes the greatest losses arrive wearing the disguise of another ordinary day. You wake up believing the story is continuing exactly as it always has, never realizing that one chapter has already closed and another has already begun. Only much later, when you revisit those memories, do you see what your heart had sensed long before your mind could understand, that interest did not vanish in a single moment. It slowly became quieter than your hope, until one day, all that remained was the echo of a connection you were still trying to hear.